I'm very happy to have with us today Ayanda Nxusani from the warehouse, but she's also a student at UCT. And she is at least a younger voice. Ayanda and, yes, Ayanda and I have done a lot of things together, including Prof. Pumla. We've facilitated the film Black Christmas together, and that was quite a good experience. Ayanda, it's lovely to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to initially just ignore Renee and her flashing cards, but I also do work with her, and so I don't want to do that. So I just have a couple of thoughts on what the Chief Justice was saying this morning, but also some thoughts of my own that I've been kind of pondering on the last couple of years. And the first one is, I think we do ourselves a great injustice when we assume best intention of each other. I think that we assume that we want the best of the other. I think the Freedom Charter gives us a prophetic image of what can be and what should be, what we hope for, but I don't think we've internalized those ideals as our own and ones that we want for the other. And so I think while we can search in ourselves and look for the better self, it is okay to assume the worst of ourselves and to work from there. I think it's also very difficult for us to create a shared future when we have a very unequal and unjust history. It's quite tough of us as a country to expect a government that itself is victim to this injustice to be forefront in pioneering anything that is shared between all of us. I think placing the role of change and reconciliation and forgiveness and mercy and grace on victims in this country is a grave injustice on its own. And again, we do ourselves a great injustice by assuming best intentions of ourselves. I think that the TRC recommendations give us a moral compass for why we desire to create a shared future. It allows us to think about how and why it's important to centralize victims of apartheid and colonialism and slavery in this country, and it's something that we all have not internalized. I think that our job primarily as a country is to assume a moral compass that isn't self-righteous, but a moral compass that says, I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge that you actually deserve the right to live freely and the right to have a meal every night. I think that we need to understand that as a society as a whole, we don't assume that we all need and require justice. And so I have 4 statements that I want to say towards that in terms of creating strategies for changing national perception. I think it is okay for us to have an intolerance to bullshit. I think it is okay for us to be intolerant of racism. I think it is okay for us to be intolerant of a country and people who refuse to change. I was in Cradock about a month ago on a research trip, and at dinner time with the family that we're staying with, it comes out that how bad this government is and how things were just much simpler back in the good old days. And I was just so burdened by the conversation, not because I assumed best of this worm that we're staying with, but also that we've done just so much work. Like South Africans, Black South Africans were pioneering the TRC, calling everyone to the table, asking everyone to be sympathetic and to be compassionate. And here you find in the small town of Cradock, a man who still believes that things were better in the good old days. And I think it's okay to be intolerant of him and to cast him out. The sad thing is that he's only 65, so he's got a good 20 years in him to be around us and to be in these conversations. And that really scares me. I think we also have to be able to communicate more broadly what the desires are. We were joking with one of my mentors about how many old white people are in the room. Hi, everyone. But there's a lot of y'all. There's a lot of old people in this room. And I don't know what's happening. Also, it's like 9 o'clock, so people have lectures, and so they can't come through. I'm a master's student, so I couldn't make the time to get here. But I think we need to be able to communicate broadly and collectively internalize the ideals that we want to see in this country, right? And so the ideals of having sanitation, flushing toilets, the dignity of being able to not have to worry about how you're gonna get to where, the safety of not being scared of your loved ones and the men around you, that they might kill you at whim. I think also we aren't collectively burdened and propelled to do more. And the more isn't this deep philosophical thing of like, oh, let's reimagine society as it is. The more is opening your bank accounts and funding a student to go to school. The more to the church, and I'm a Christian, is to realize that your buildings are empty for 6 days in a week. They are only used for 4 or 5 hours on Sundays. And they're unoccupied for 6 days. So I work for an organization called Outliers, and we help people run after-school programs. And one of the biggest issues that we have is that there aren't spaces for men and women to run these after-school programs, so open your damn doors. You know what I mean? Like, open your damn doors and let people come into your space and be made up to feel uncomfortable and create that kind of change. You got 2 garages, both of them are empty for at least 8 hours while you're at work, open your damn doors. One other thing that I want to speak to is a lack of willpower to do more. So I was sharing on our drive here at 7 o'clock in the morning about how there's things that I just don't care about because they don't affect me. And so I was shamefully saying to Caroline that I don't really think about how much patient attendance pay get earned monthly or weekly. It doesn't affect me. I Uber everywhere, so I don't really think about it. And that shouldn't be the cause, right? I think that because we don't experience these big kind of oppressive spaces, you don't walk into a room and you feel othered. You don't walk into the room and be the only young person in the room, the only black person in the room. And so because you don't experience those kind of injustices, you don't really care. And so the work to even have to convince people to untangle themselves from being racist, to convince people that colonialism wasn't a blessing to us. The act of having to convince people to come to the room is violence on its own. And so what I often speak to Dion about is the act of daily untanglement that he does as a white man and what other white men need to be doing, and women. It's to one, admit your proclivity to continuously being racist and continuously perpetuating racism, to admit that and to do the daily work of untangling, and to open your damn doors and give back everything that you stole. Thank you.